guys, welcome to the Creative Block. I'm really excited today. We have Barbara Ford Grant, who is an artist, innovator, accomplished media executive, known for her contributions in the field of VFX and digital production. She stands out as a prominent figure in the entertainment industry with an expertise in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Having built a successful career in VFX, Barbara has held key positions at DreamWorks Animation, Sony Pictures, Imageworks, Digital Domain, and Walt Disney Studios. She's also served as Senior Vice President, Digital Production Services at HBO, where she led studio production, post-production operations, and next-gen technologies. She currently holds the position of Chair of the Scientific and Technical Awards Committee for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, first ever woman to hold this position. You and I met, I don't know, a month ago or so. You spoke at a panel. I was totally inspired by your background. I was inspired by your forward thinking and acceptance of new technologies that are coming. And I was really looking forward to just sit down and dive a little deeper. So I'm just super grateful and I appreciate the time.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Vince. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for that very, very warm and detailed introduction.
When you were at the panel and speaking, one of the things that I really loved was you mentioned HI. I mean, everybody's talking about, machine learning and artificial intelligence, and you mentioned HI, which is human intelligence. So this idea that, all of this tech that's happening, at the end of the day, us carbon forms have to produce good storytelling and connect in a community. And so hopefully all of this tech that's coming out helps us do that better. But I found it really great that you kind of circled back to that and reminded us that we still have to be good storytellers.
Yeah, and we're also still the best artists, I think. There's so much that machine learning and AI can do to help assist us, and I'm excited about it. And I talked about a number of those things I'm very excited about, because I think I've always found emerging technologies to be a good collaborator in anything that I've done. But I don't see it as a replacement for human intelligence and artist authorship. Like machine learning is incredible at finding patterns, and AI can solve problems at a speed we humanly are incapable, we could not solve. It's going to identify patterns from data and suggest things that we can't come up with as humans. But what it's probably, and I'm not saying it won't, because I don't want to get in arguments with people who feel differently, but the idea that it is going to take creative risk in the way that an artist would, where your experience, the patterns you find, the ideas about what would come next, and then your emotional interest in kind of defying something or breaking a rule or changing the patterns of behavior from being a human, from your own personal experience, from those stories that you bring to the table. Not only do I feel like I think machines, they're not designed to take creative risks the way a human would. I also think that that's the thing that we should be focused on continuing to invest in. That is the thing that humans bring to the table.
Yeah, I love that. And tell me a little bit about your background as an artist, because I noticed that mentioned in your bio.
Yeah, I studied art history and art studio.
Oh, wow.
At University of New Mexico, and I had started as a traditional drawing and painting artist, and then moved into photography, and then 4 years into it, I just kept moving more technical, which is interesting because the art history kept going earlier and earlier. I had started very post-World War II focused in art history, and then in the end was really very interested in the emergence of human communication, visual communication from the earliest, like the buffalo this way in the springtime, But what started to come together for me, mainly my last couple of years at UNM, I had been introduced to a guy named Gene Youngblood, who wrote the book on, his first book was experimental video, I think it was called. But you know,
Oh,
if you
wow.
really there in Santa Fe in the early days of early installation art, you know, Bruce Nauman was there, the Basulkas, Bill Viola, all these people were doing very highly technical, you know, playing around with video and other technology to create installation art. And he was my advisor for a while, and I started building. I was interested in like, how do I take my interest in very visually, aesthetically appealing work, painting and drawing, and create a relationship with the technology that was starting to emerge. So it started out actually as a dialogue with like all, you know, video and computers, early computer graphics, and like, you know, a relationship between painting and drawing, and doing it in this sort of way. I made rivers out of TV sets that were turned on their side.
Wow.
And it just never went away. My interest in finding that relationship, and the way it sort of led me into visual effects and animation is probably surprising if you didn't know that about me, but it was that I was very interested in how do we get these tools to be aesthetically appealing. And so I came in initially as a digital artist, as a 2D digital artist and a 3D digital artist. And then I just was never happy with the way it looked on the monitor or the way it looked on the film. And so it got me involved with color science and like what actually happens to the data, what happens to the pixel values, why do they change from, you know, looking like this in a linear space with a certain gamma to a log space with a certain gamma when you see it in the theater. Yeah, and then it just kept going. It's been more that dance between art and technology that has driven all my choices than any specific one problem to solve in it. You know, so I've moved around a lot from animation to visual effects, on-set technology, real-time rendering, shading, and physically based, you know, really physically accurate human rendering of characters. And it's just been all over the map if you just look at the history. But it's really about like getting that fidelity so that you have, you get over that barrier, that's not just the uncanny valley, but that barrier between I'm a human, that's technical, that's not something I can emotionally relate to. You know, story
Yeah.
does really well and easily when humans act in a way that like that sounds familiar, that seems authentic, you immediately are drawn to that. With computer generated stuff, it's hard. It's been a long, you know, it's been a tall hill to climb, but it's happening.
Yeah, yeah. And now I completely understand why I was so attracted to you, to what you do is, you know, I started out as a photographer, and even, you know, you and I met, I'm here at SC, but for many, many years, I worked parallel as a fine art and commercial photographer. And, you know, it's always in me. I always do it. And then later in life, I asked myself, well, why do you do it? And then realized it's a language. You know,
Yeah.
it's a language that I was creating, that in a way that I was connecting to people, somebody just like you, that, you know, I could like, well, here's this, and then you would get it, and then we would have a connection. And so it's a fun process, and I love taking the art and the tech and, you know, bridging that. So that's, I'm super
Yeah, it's
impressed.
so interesting until you say, I mean, it really is a communication, and movies are, cinema is a communication tool, right? These are all communication tools. I hadn't thought about it the way you just described. It's lovely. I love photography too for that reason, is that it's an immediate bridge. You know, more than painting. I love painting because just the aesthetic of it, but it's sometimes it's, you know, I see this, you see that, you know, it means different things, and so does a photograph, but the realism of a photograph has a much more immediate connection, like a bridge of communication in
Yeah.
language, right?
Yeah.
And so in cinema, I think has that too.
So as a pioneer in VFX and technology, what because some groups will be like, you know, this is what I've done. I'm just going to sit here and refine this technology that I'm familiar with. You seem to be doing that, and also on purpose, looking at the horizon, looking at all the emerging tech and interweaving that as well.
I came in digital native in the early 90s, and just trying things like, oh, okay, now we have this, let's try and see what we could do, not worrying about how, and I was sort of an outsider too. I wasn't put on a big movie, so I didn't have to figure out how that worked in all the other ways that they used to make a movie, and I could just do sort of things off to the side. And then luckily I was saved. I was brought over to DreamWorks Animation, which was brand new. And this is where it got interesting. This is where I found out, oh, actually, I do have to kind of work with older pipelines and understand how people work. Is that the first movie that we did was Prince of Egypt. And it was largely traditional animators. They had come from two places, Emblemation and from Disney. A lot of these folks had come over from Emblemation and Disney. And, you know, it was hand-drawn animation, hand-drawn in-betweening. Ink and paint and compositing was done digitally using, it was like a post-cap system. It was the Cambridge Animations. I can't remember the name of it. But it was, you know, it was very much a traditional, except for a couple of scenes that were done in CG. And the prologue scene with the basket going down the water and the Red Sea splitting. And the Red Sea in particular, the water scene was sort of a, I'm going to call it a 2.5D. There was some elastic, there were some things, it was not traditional, but it wasn't exactly a full CG sequence either. But the Red Sea was, and it was done almost entirely in prisms at the time, which is the precursor to Houdini. And so it was an entire team of 3D artists, you know, particle systems and dynamics artists working on this sequence. And they had come from ILM and Rhythm and Hues and all these other places that had CG background. And once I got a taste of that, I was like, everything started to seem like there's got to be an easier way to me. Like it became a problem to solve. And not everyone wants these problems solved. If you, depending on where you are. And so this is a long way of getting to the answer, because I think this relates to AI and how quickly it's going to be adopted is going to really depend on the context of the folks, like where it's being adopted. You know, for DreamWorks, I wound up going up to PDI, which is a totally CG studio to work on and worked on several films up there. It took DreamWorks in LA, I think, a decade to go from, they went from traditional to tradigital, which is a Jeffrey term that was used for a little while in a couple films, to fully CG over like a decade it took. And part of that was that, you know, from my cold dead handle, you take this Disney desk that rotates and I, you know, like didn't, you know, it was very hard. A simple thing, like for me, when I saw this Antique, it was a no-brainer, even though it was slow and had, you know, the initial ones, they like you couldn't see your hand, they were hard. And so it took a while to adopt, but it was, the writing was on the wall. We're not going to be using a pencil and paper because of the efficiency. You already have, all this stuff was having to be scanned on down shooters. So I looked at, for a traditional animator, they're like, you know, this is how I work. And this is a shortcoming of a young person coming in saying, well, I already know how we're going to fix this and I can see what the future looks like. So why don't you just use this? And they're like, no, I had a career. And by the way, and you know, a illustrious career doing this with a pencil and paper. And that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm 20 years into my career. Why do I care about something that's still 5 years out? You know, for me, it was first the Cintiqs. It was moving to Photoshop. It was moving from 2D to Maya and there have been a lot of these transitions, you know, moving to performance capture and mocap. That was a very emotional journey for a lot of people. I'm never going to use mocap data. We're going to keyframe animate everything we do. And, you know, whether it's done I think there are countless like incremental cases along the way. I think the move from traditional to CG was big. I think the move to performance capture and to virtual production and real-time rendering is another big one. I think AI is going to, depending on where you are in your ability to adapt to change, is going to be enormous for our industry.
Yeah, that's incredible. You know, I was attached to the first couple of Rugrats movies, you know, when those came out. And that was a great experience. And it was a rare moment because we're talking about, you know, you mentioned turnarounds, storyboards, character design, all pencil to paper. The animation, a lot of the character design went from that to in a digital world. It was cut in Avid. It was output to film. And one of my jobs was to take the print to Paramount and assemble reels for screenings.
Right, dailies. Yeah.
Yeah, dailies, and then full reels that we would take to theaters for the test screenings
Right.
in
Yes.
print, 35 millimeter print.
I had a little bit of a stint doing that as well for both DreamWorks in LA and for up at PDI, and until this is so this was a problem for me. So it's a perfect example of how I got more involved in doing R&D and built, and actually went from using emerging tech to helping to build it. Was I was on Shrek 4D, which was originally going to be a Shrek IMAX project. It wound up being a universal ride, but initially it started as an IMAX project. And up in the Bay Area, we're up in Palo Alto at the time at PDI, and there was nowhere to screen IMAX. So for us to do animation dailies, you render it out, you create a log file, you'd send that file on an exabyte down to LA, it'd get filmed out, or whatever, some other drive, maybe it was the next generation after. We didn't have the bandwidth to actually do it over the wire then, like a tape, some sort of media device was sent to LA. It would get filmed out, it would go to a lab, and then we'd fly down to LA, rent out the Science Center by you.
Yeah.
One of the places you could, and we would look at dailies. It was absurd. So it would be like twice a month that we'd get to see things big. At the same time, Digital Systems, which was like I think they had mostly done defense work, but they were sort of a precursor to all the other folks who came in to play with digital projection. They had, I think, one of the first, they had done a collaboration with, I think it was Texas Instrument. It may have been some other chip besides the DMD chip, but I think it was the first DMD chip projector. It was Rec 7, it wasn't 709, it was 601. It was like, 64 to 254 broadcast color space. It was, I think it was like 422 or 411. It was not great at all.
Yeah.
But we figured out we could attach an O2, SGI O2 to it, get video out to this projector, and we could see things. And that was at least better than having to wait to, twice a month to fly it down there. This, similar to what you're seeing right now, like that evolution happened very quickly.
Yeah.
Like reading, CPUs got faster, reading off of drives got faster. The projectors got better. They went from that chip to the dark chip. I don't know if you remember any of this, DMD chips, which are the micro mirror chips that Texas Instruments invented that are still laser projectors. This is how all cinema projectors were done. They were at like a very tight clip. They were iterating and making them better. And then we took multiple of these, stacked them up. We got to 2K. We played around with the color, and we're like, we should just use this for daily. So we started building flipbook software, and that became, and then eventually it was playback software. And then we started building out our own DDRs, these digital recording boxes, so that we could play out. And eventually we'd gotten to a place where we could replace film dailies completely. We're like, why would we go to film at all? We're mostly going, at the same time, the theaters are moving to digital as well. And so it was like, we're doing film and digital for a few years while they did their transition. And then eventually and so it wound up being Shrek 4D, which went to Orlando, Hollywood, and Osaka, Japan, was the first themed entertainment installation totally digitally done. Like all the others had been filmed up until that point. And we're like,
yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great collaboration because Universal became very interested in, like, this would save us a lot of money. We're constantly from scratches. We're constantly having to refresh. So once we got on to a rhythm about it, I got a lot of pushback, from certain people. Like, I need to see film. I can't look, I can't judge, so there, I don't want to, short sell that. There was a lot of emotion about transitioning from film dailies to digital dailies. But I think for all of these, I remember, doing previs. Nobody wanted to do pre-visualization because it needed to happen at this point, like moving things in the pipeline or moving the tool that you've become successful through using for something else. That's an emotional transition for people.
It was interesting because even when I was working on the film, I'm sitting in a room at Paramount that used to cut the old Lucille Ball episode. I'm
Sure.
on a synchronizer, I'm on a splicing block, I have a moviola behind me that I could look
Got
at.
a big arm muscle from
Yeah,
cranking.
totally. 1,000-foot reel, split reels, and even then I was thinking, this is so romantic. I feel so fortunate to be having this experience because I will never have it again. There's no way you can go forward and make this sustainable. It's obvious, you know what I mean? But
I
I was
still
really
love
grateful.
that. And the preciousness, I was talking to somebody recently about just the preciousness of holding film.
Yeah.
We take for granted that you have these digital files. I'm like, oh, we better have backups and we have stuff in the archive. But like you hold something that physically, if you drop that can or
Yeah.
the preciousness of it,
Yeah.
especially the camera negative. I had one brief stint as a film loader on set, and it was the most stressful job I
Oh yeah.
ever had. Right? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. What about AI? Because you mentioned this, and I found it really great because I didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. AI in pipelines and post-production.
It's been maybe not everywhere, but machine learning in particular has been in post pipelines for more than a decade in some contexts. It's been used for more efficient render management. It's been used for scaling up, denoising. I think some people have been using it for auto color correct for a while, but it's been in various places, certainly in the asset management too, data tagging and efficiently moving stuff on and off disk or to edge cache really, like to your point, for mundane tasks, for creating efficiencies, for doing things faster and cheaper. Where they've been, I feel like people have been focused for well over a decade, and it's a tricky one, but I think it's finally getting there. Is like on roto and paint. Like we've known for a long time that roto and paint is expensive. It's been, you use it all over the place. Match move. There are these tasks that take thousands of artists sometimes on productions, and we often, send this to. We farm those sorts of things. We outsource those because it's like considered the less creative tasks. You're cleaning up, you're infilling and painting, and I've seen all these iterations over the past decade of AI trying to solve that problem. And it's, it's a temporal problem, it's a fidelity problem, it's a sometimes an aesthetic problem, there's transparency. It's actually a really hard problem to solve. So sometimes like the things that seem like the lowest hanging fruit are actually very expensive problems to solve. And human labor is still largely employed to do those sorts of things. And then I see things like and just to back up a little, sorry, it's a task that you'll find in other contexts, but it's largely a visual effects problem. Roto paint it doesn't show up in other industries as much as a visual effect. And then you take something like, audio dubbing or, sort of AI-driven speech to verbalization. I forget what the term is for that. And it's like,
Even
that's
like temp tracks and things like that.
yeah, that's used everywhere. The other industries are way ahead of us and comfortable using that. And it's just going to be there because it's interesting to a wider breadth of industries.
It's almost like an investment, you could imagine, because even if, there are right now, it makes the most sense to have warm bodies do this because it is in the moment the most efficient. You could almost imagine developing the tech to replace that.
I think that's been imagined for a very
Yeah.
long time, and they've been, very smart people, Intel, NVIDIA, and other places have been working on this. I think it proved to be a harder problem. It seemed like a not that difficult problem because it's not, it's a non-creative task, but it's proved to be computationally sort of difficult. And I think the challenge and speaking from a visual effects, like what you need it to look like perspective, if it's only getting you 80%, it's almost not worth it because an artist has to go back and redo the splines or repaint those things frame by frame. Then it almost becomes not worth it. So it's the level, and this is true of everything in visual effects. What we expect versus what other industries expect there's such a delta there. Like good enough for most industries is here, whereas, good enough in visual effects might be way up here in terms of accuracy. And I have no doubt it's going to get there, and it'll get there pretty quickly, but it's taken a lot, it's taken a long time to go fast. AI, I think, and machine learning for solutions in visual effects has taken a very long time to now what is clearly going to go very fast. Because not only is it like making production more efficient and it's requiring less labor, that I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of big studios, tentpole film studios, they're going to say that more important than cost is time. If I can get shots back faster, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. It makes me think of the you've seen the self-driving cars, Waymo, right?
I've seen them stuck in traffic. Yes.
I've seen them stuck in traffic. I almost hit one the other day.
Oh,
But
no.
a lot of people are like, I'm hearing this from my circle. They're like, I will never get in one of those, all of that. But the truth is the last 2 times I was in an Uber, I was kind of scared. So statistically, when you think about, removing the human error of something like that, I think it could be really something amazing.
I think the irony of that is we'll get in airplanes that are largely AI driven all the time. Like pilots there to try and
Yeah.
but we're already soaking in it. We're already sitting in it.
I love that reference.
And I just feel like the self-driving car is kind of interesting because I remember very distinctly, I'm going to say it's probably 15 years ago now, 12, 15 years ago, a number of people I had worked with in visual effects who had come from a computer vision or simulations background got sucked up by the self-driving car industry.
Oh, wow.
They've all been working because it's a computer vision, simulating data, computer vision, it's like, that is the problem space. And it's an industrial problem. And it's kind of interesting that, what would have taken a really long time in visual effects to solve is now being solved very quickly outside of visual effects.
So let's talk about the Academy a little bit, the SciTech console. How did that happen for you? And as now that you have the role, what's your aspiration going forward for that position?
Yeah, I originally got involved. So the SciTech committee, there's a SciTech council, which works on largely like far-reaching problem solving, technology problem solving or technology education for the industry. And they do, ACES came out of the council, some work on LED light chromaticity. They have initiatives that are multi-year, looking to engage the community and help standardize or create common language around things that are emerging. The SciTech Awards Committee is very specifically, and it's been around since 1931, was the first year that scientific and technical awards were given, are specifically to acknowledge people, mostly individuals, sometimes companies, who have invented, who have created novel technologies specifically for use in motion picture that have advanced, have changed how we do it. So from the context of visual effects and animation, like Houdini, Maya, Avid, those would be company like tools that have really done it. And large fluid systems, character animation systems, motion capture, where once these things have happened, everyone's like, I got to get me some of that. And and it's become sort of ubiquitous in use in the
new standard.
Yeah, and so it's been really exciting to participate. I originally got involved from my expertise in color science and image processing, and I was brought on because this is how it is. It's usually a small committee, between 30 and 70 people, depending on the scope of the body of work that they're going to investigate for that award cycle. And they bring on people specifically to things that they're looking at. I was brought on because it was DI, which you know all about. It was the year that we were looking at the DI ecosystem. So everything from the review system, color correction, to how it was projected. And my focus on the image processing and color science, so really the color side of it. And that was 2007. It seems like a cloak and dagger. It was very, even when I was coming into it, it was like, this is an old boys club. And
Yeah.
I'm not
That's
going to say I love these guys, and then they become my
Yeah.
friends and colleagues over the years. I mean, 2007, this was 16, 17 years ago now. I was brought on the digital imaging, which is a digital imaging subcommittee of the main committee. And I was the first woman brought onto that committee. And I was doing my part to just be at the table, right? I was so excited to be there. And then 3 or 4 years into it, I remember, and you know, at the time I came on the committee, like Kim Library, Ray Feeney, Doug Roble, like the committee was just so intimidating that I was just happy to be there. I think Rob Breda might have still been. It was just a very impressive committee. And but after a while, I'm like, this is a lot of white men. And I started to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And it took a couple of years, you know, because it's a very, there are people who've been doing it. So the other thing I should say, there were no term limits at the time. So there had been, you know, Richard Edlin had been the chair of the main committee for, I think, 23 years.
Wow.
Before he stepped down. There were a lot of repeat, so it was very hard to get new people in, because the same people would come back year after year. Eventually, we could bring more people on the subcommittee, on the digital imaging subcommittee, because it was topical, and it was often software and emerging, you know, very high-tech, emerging tech stuff. And, you know, some of the old timers were less domain
Ownership. They didn't have ownership of it.
Yeah, and so that they welcome new people who had that sort of expertise, and so we were able to add some diversity in that way. And so the DISC committee, it's the shorthand which I never liked, but it's called the DISC committee. We're able to bring interesting new people onto that. When term limits happened, and this is like, I'm gonna say like 7 or 8 years ago, it was easier to bring. It was pretty dramatic. It was a very emotional thing, I think, for people who had been on the committee for decades, who were now turned off. But it did open up a lot of seats, and we were able to bring in, we have a much more diverse committee now. But there's still a lot of challenges. So I moved to the main committee, and then Ray Feeney, actually, you know, who's a luminary in this industry, was asked me to be the vice chair in, I think it was 2017. So I served as his vice chair, and then Doug Roble's vice chair, and then in 2020 became the chair, which I'm so proud of, and I love, and I have so much admiration for the integrity of the work that we do, and just how much, you know, the collaboration, first of all, with the Board of Governors and the Academy itself to kind of make these changes happen, to help kind of move this forward, to progress the committee and the work that they do, while still maintaining the importance of what it's for, right? Because it's very different, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. You know, the Oscars, all the other Oscars are for things that happen in a given year. You know, the best actor, and I'm not, they're not popularity awards, but they're the best of what the industry had to offer according to its peers for that year. Scientific and technical awards are not time bound at all. And sometimes, and very often, these awards are to people like for lifetime work. It's taken a lifetime to get them to reach a level with the technology. It's changed the industry. Sometimes it happens in a few years and a few films, and sometimes it could be for many decades. And it's just a very different process, and to recognize these kinds of awards. And we've been able to bring in so many amazing people globally too. We got people who participate from the UK, from Italy, from Australia, Southeast Asia. We're trying to bring in a much more global community to look at, because it is, technology in particular is a global industry for the movie business. For me, what I'm hoping to do now, and we're just wrapping up, we just did the awards on the 23rd, and Natasha Leon was the host, and bar none my favorite host. She was fantastic. For one really important reason. Well, she's very funny, and she's a great personality to begin with. She did her homework, and she really she had the sincerity about like the way that she wanted to talk about what this kind of highly technical, usually we get a lot of hosts sort of poke fun at this techie stuff, this nerdy
Yeah.
words, and I don't know what that is, but congratulations to you. This person really wanted to connect with what it was and show gratitude for that work that had happened in a way that I had not seen a host do before in a long time. Not to say that others haven't, but it was a really good, it was a very good feeling. So for me, I'm actually looking to, I guess I can say this now, I'm going to be stepping away from chairing for a couple of years and look more broadly at the sciences for the motion picture industry and how they are elevated within the academy and within the industry and the academy's members, and just getting more visibility to the relationship between the science and the arts.
I love that.
So probably getting more involved with mentor programs, education, panels, and the other branches.
I love that.
I'm
That's
super
amazing.
excited about that.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's exciting. You know, it's funny because I think I mentioned I'm a committee member at Blockchain at USC, which is a student-run organization.
Yeah.
And I've said this several times out loud in these rooms, is that, the rooms are full of guys, you know what I mean? And it's like there's got to be ways where, we can encourage all kinds of different people into this.
Yes, and I think, for better or worse, we need to encourage it. I was at an event last night, Women in AI
Yeah.
org, and it was hosted at Scope Lane. It was a great event. It was not widely attended. It was largely attended by women who are already in AI. And this is sort of an issue that I think I have too. I've struggled to find the right answers, that it's a bit of an echo chamber and we have a legacy issue.
Yeah.
Right. When we look around and we see these rooms full of men, these are largely men who've always been in emerging tech, who've always been in AI, or always been involved with blockchain. They're already interested. How do we talk to the ones who are not in the room, who are not already showing up to these things? And so that's really where I want to focus. Even I looked at the awards and I rightfully got a lot of comments this year, because it was a great year. Very proud of all the technologies and all the people that we honored this year, but it was entirely men. Every single awardee, every award we gave out was to men, and that's not a problem. They all deserve those awards.
Sure.
But it's a legacy. In particular, SciTech we're looking in the rearview mirror, right? So it's people who've been working on technologies for many years. We need to get more folks involved that, interested that this is a career choice, that there's lots of interesting problems to solve here. And there's also accolades for it. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when you think about even economic and social barriers, you go to museums or I go to academy events, there's always, these groups of people that always kind of look the same, you know what I mean? And so I think that, having conversations with younger people and making them believe, that are not necessarily attached to Hollywood, that this is a real possibility, is kind of a challenge.
Yeah, it's a probability. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's sort of motivated me to want to get more involved with the rest of the academy. And they have like the gold member, they do internships, and there's a few, like, how do we introduce them to not just the sciences, but where science meets art? There is a wonderful gentleman at Pixar who used to teach this class, Math Can Be Fun. I think he called it something else, but it was basically the math and science behind making this beloved Pixar movies. Like, you can take your degree in physics, your degree in mathematics, linear algebra, and hear all the cool things you can do with it.
Well, that's incredible work. And, never hesitate to reach out to me if I can help in any way, or,
thank you. Likewise. I mean, I love, as being on the educator side of this, like ideas about how we better reach out, how we get people interested, how we get more diversity into the pipeline. I'm curious.
We're just better off with a diverse amount of people in the room. And to your point, like, all of those people that you're celebrating absolutely deserve it. it could be better if it's really mixed up.
Yeah, it's a plus.
It's a plus, it's a value, you know what I mean?
Plus
And
it.
it raises everybody up, so.
Yeah. Do you see in your blockchain groups opportunities to change like avenues for getting new people in the room?
I feel like me personally needs to be more proactive on my part, like looking around, like pointing people, having conversations, check this out. This might be a thing for you, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to connect with you. I love the work that you're doing, and hopefully, we're we're just going to keep connecting more people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let me just close with this one thing. And again, I'm really grateful for your time. What are you excited about kind of on the horizon that is happening in terms of entertainment and visual effects and things like that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think I'm both excited and concerned, to be honest. I'm excited because I think there's a whole, the hesitance we might have with institutionalized thinking about pipelines and how movies get made, it's going to get turned on its head. And, it's an opportunity which doesn't happen very often, where we can kind of rethink how things are how we creatively collaborate. And I think it's the AI has really opened up a lot of conversation. I know there's a lot of fears, but there's also a lot of like, wow, I'm having this relationship with a machine that I haven't had before, where it was, it took 3 days, now it takes 3 minutes to get something that I can have a conversation with another person about. So that's undeniable. I think there's the extension of that, and what that means from a creating of storytelling perspective, and is different than which is, I think, going to be a lot of different things. It's not just going to be long form films anymore. It's already, it's evolving, it's changing. I also see a whole new generation of people who think differently about how to experience stories. What stories mean for them, and they may, whereas I spent my life seeing many 90-minute to 3-hour movies in a year, and some amount of clips for the majority of my life, it's the reverse for this generation. They may see some movies, but they're largely seeing very short things.
Short
and
form.
they're seeing things that they, interactions, it's natural to be built in. They expect to be able to interact with these things. They expect to be able to participate. Maybe they expect to be able to generate things as part of their story, like they're creating their story within a story, like Fortnite. They may want to take that story with them. There may be secondary markets or secondary worlds where, and there already are, unlike saying things that already exist, where what they created out of their generative participation isn't maybe more important than the original thing. And none of that, like, that's all creativity. And I think that's exciting. The concern part is, and this might be the old school in me, this is where, like, even though I'm not a boomer, but I feel like we're all boomers if we're over the age of 25 for some reason, where like shared experience is no longer like having the same, like seeing the same movie, right, versus seeing my personalized version of that experience. Is that going to get replaced? Like, are kids going to have shared experiences, or is their shared experience be describing, well, in the way you do it, like if you both play a game, my game experience was this, oh, well, my game experience was that. And the cultural fabric that comes around comes with shared experience. So I think that's just sort of my concern, is where generative AI takes us from a shared experience perspective. Because stories are hard to craft. And this kind of gets back to, and sorry, I'm meandering a little bit, but I love it. Back to the beginning of our conversation about human intelligence and human authorship. Really good stories are architected. They're not, they take time to craft. You say this line and then this line, and it just, it systematically, predictably builds itself. You might get a story, but it's not going to be a great story. I mean, the best stories that emotionally compel us are the ones that are kind of difficult to understand for a long time, then it sort of comes together. Because you're carried along on a journey with somebody. And so that resolution is like so satisfying. I hope we don't lose that, because those are the stories that the moral of the story, the fable of the story, those are the ones that we've carried for generations that help us navigate and understand each other.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's Sundance, and I went to 2 of the shorts programs, and I was sharing this with a friend yesterday. So, and they asked about what were some of the themes, and I was like, all but one of them had to do with isolation or social media, and isolation to some extent. Like that is what young kids are dealing with, and it's interesting to me that they'll probably promote the heck out of their I'm sure their identity with that film is largely living in social media. But like the importance of things like Sundance or movie theater, like the ability to bring these people together. I hate to see us lose that.
Yeah. I don't think we will. I think that there's going to be some dirty edges, and there's going to be some,
I like that term.
ugly fallout, as this happens. And there's definitely going to be, people left by the wayside, isolation, people that struggle anyway under the pressure of new tech. It's going to exacerbate that with them. But I think I'm the nerd optimist. I think ultimately we're trying to always, find that community no matter what, so.
Yeah, sure. That's good. I like your optimism. We'll figure it out because we're human.
We better.
I like that.
Thank you so much for making the time. I
you.
really appreciate it. I look forward to staying in connection with you and, supporting you in any way that I can, because I think it's really fantastic what you're doing. And I'm really glad this happened. And as soon as I saw you speak at that panel, a month ago or so, I was like, I gotta talk to her.
I appreciate that.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it too. And
Yeah,
so,
fun being here. It's fun chatting with you. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Bye.